Early in the morning, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Georgia, a black woman was walking her two dogs, just like any other day. She was silent, composed, her footsteps light. But then, a patrol car silently crept up. Two police officers stepped out, their gazes unfriendly. They didn't know that the woman used to be a Navy SEAL. They also didn't know that the two dogs beside her were not ordinary pets. A simple question, a misplaced glance, and then everything exploded. Gunshots, growls, blood. The face of power revealed its true nature, and this time, it chose the wrong person. What state are you in when you hear this story? Leave a comment below. And now, let's hear the story. As the first morning light spilled onto the suburban streets of Southcrest, the city still seemed asleep. The rooftops were silent, the lawns still misted with dew, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Except for her. Amara Briggs, the black woman who lived at the end of Cedar Lane, in an old gray-painted house set apart with a gate that always stayed shut and two strange dogs that never left her side. They called her the Black Ghost. Kids were curious, adults kept their distance. She didn't attend neighborhood parties, didn't go to church on Sunday mornings, or join any local social media groups. She arrived at the convenience store on time, spoke little, and never smiled. And more than anything, she didn't look like anyone else around here. Since she moved in, the whispers never stopped. She's been to prison. No, I heard she was a mercenary in the Middle East. I heard she's some kind of undercover agent like CIA or FBI. No one knew anything for sure, but everyone agreed on one thing. Don't mess with her, and don't mess with the dogs. This morning was like any other. Amara wore a black jacket, a baseball cap, and stepped out of the gate with chaos and mercy. She moved lightly, almost without a sound, as if those tactical boots were made to blend into the ground. Chaos was large, muscular, with coat black, and sleek coat like cold steel, ears pointed, and walked on the left. Mercy, smaller, leaner, eyes sharp like lasers, walked tight on the right. Neither of them barked. No running, no pulling at the leash. They moved like a unit, like the three of them had once walked unnamed streets somewhere, with gunfire roaring behind them. The morning wind was crisp. Dry leaves rustled underfoot. Amara passed house number 204, where Mrs. Millen always peeked out from behind the curtain. This time, her gaze followed Amara like she was waiting for something to happen. Amara knew. They were all waiting for her to slip up. She carried nothing but the leashes. But at her side, under the jacket, was a long, faded scar. Old, silvery, stretching from her left hip to her ribs. It itched faintly in the cold, a kind of bodily warning. Crossing the intersection leading to the small park, she saw a police car parked in the distance, lights off, engine silent. No one got out, but she knew they were watching. Not the first time, not the first car. She was back home by 7:32 a.m. Like always, fed the dogs, checked the camera system around the house, went into the small training room out back where a wall of black and white photos hung, a SEAL unit, faces long gone, eyes that had looked into hell and come back. Amara took off her jacket, revealing arms covered in tattoos, unit codes, coordinates, and symbols. On a wooden shelf sat 3 dusty medals, a small locked box, and an empty handgun, kept not for shooting, but remembering. She turned on the morning news, economics, politics, then a faint segment. Southcrest Police Department continues residential checks in the area to ensure community safety. She gave a half smile. That night, as the city went dark, the wind shifted. Chaos lifted his head, ears alert. Mercy stepped slowly to the window, silent as a shadow. Amara stopped what she was doing, set the book down on the table. Through the slit in the curtain, she saw a figure, then 2. No uniforms, no flashlights, no voices calling out, a light press on her phone, the security system activated. No alarms, no sirens, just a series of signals feeding into the small earpiece Amara wore, detecting motion in the backyard. 2 targets, splitting direction. She didn't move, just placed a finger on Mercy's neck. The dogs didn't growl, didn't whine, but their heart rates shifted. Ready. When the back door eased open with a soft creak, Amara stood, light as vapor, no gun, no blade needed. She stood there, caught in the dim kitchen light, and said a single word: wait. The figures froze. Metal clinked. Chaos emerged from the shadows like a ghost, soundless, blocking the path. His eyes gleamed like metal. One man staggered back, tripping on the threshold. We're just checking. The voice trembled. No radio, no warrant, no badge. Amara said nothing. She looked at Mercy. The dog didn't move, but her eyes didn't blink, and that was enough to make the man run. The night passed. No alarms triggered, no incident reports filed, but the cameras caught everything, and Amara knew this was only the beginning. Because when a system wants to break someone who doesn't conform, it doesn't knock, it doesn't speak, it lurks, watches, falsifies, and waits for the perfect moment to take them down with rules written in prejudice. But this time, it picked the wrong one. No alarms were triggered after that night. No one called the police. And of course, not a single local news outlet reported two dark figures sneaking around someone's house. But Amara's cameras caught everything. Every frame, every step, every ragged breath of the men who tried to slip in, like her home was just another training ground. She didn't send the footage to anyone. No need. They hadn't attacked. They were probing, and she had answered. The next morning, Chaos and Mercy lay still in the backyard, sunlight slanting through the trees, alert, awake, motionless. Amara was cleaning a training weapon, dismantling it piece by piece, placing each part on a coarse cloth like a familiar ritual. She didn't own dogs. She didn't consider them pets. From the first day she received them from the Navy base, they had never been pets. They were soldiers. Chaos was bred from a Belgian Malinois crossed with an old German Shepherd line. Thick coat, elongated canines. Reflexes are nearly undetectable by civilian-grade equipment. Trained in urban siege simulation, he could chase through burning basements, track scents in tear gas, and attack while gunfire echoed. Mercy was his opposite. Compact, lean muscle, each movement surgically precise. She didn't growl, showed no emotion, but once she locked on, nothing else mattered. She'd followed Amara into the tightest enemy dens, wounded but never stopping. Both survived the final retreat. Amara endured the one where she lost nearly her entire team, the one where reinforcements never came. Chaos carried her on his back when her thigh was bleeding out. Mercy stayed pressed against her chest for 14 hours in a collapsed hole, while enemy troops above torched the fallen one by one. Since then, she trusted no one else. No one else was worthy. Her house wasn't just protected by cameras and sensors. There was also a line of sound-encoded commands for Chaos and Mercy. Not basic sit, stay, heal nonsense. Each sound cue was a tactical directive. One whistle, Chaos would distract left, Mercy would flank right and close in. They were a unit, extensions of her, and now the last barrier between her and a world that couldn't tolerate what it didn't understand. At the Southcrest police station, the names Chaos and Mercy started circulating in unofficial briefings. In the break room, Officer Rickson, chewing on a stale sandwich, muttered, "I swear that dog was reading my mind." His superior, Renner, said nothing, just lit a cigarette and stared at the neighborhood map pinned to the wall. The house at the end of Cedar Lane looked like any other from the outside, but none of the officers believed that anymore. They'd seen, they'd heard, and some, quietly, were afraid. Not Renner. He wasn't afraid of her, but he remembered. He recognized the silhouette when he saw the footage from the patrol cam. Something in her eyes had made his skin crawl. He'd met her before, on a mission gone wrong. A SEAL, that SEAL, who dismantled an entire squad of mercs in one night. He hadn't known her name then, but now he knew her face. Within 48 hours, a soft surveillance op was launched. A black SUV parked 2 houses down, posing as private security. A low-frequency drone passed overhead at 4 a.m. A plainclothes officer, disguised as a postal worker, appeared twice in the same hour window. Amara saw it all. She sat in her living room, holding a lukewarm coffee, eyes watching a split screen of camera feeds. Each camera was fixed on a blind spot, places no one else would consider. But she knew that's where people with intentions always approach. She saw the mailman hesitate when Mercy raised her head toward the window. She saw Renner standing by the SUV, speaking into a radio. They were closing in, slowly, deliberately. No weapons drawn, no overt force, but no attempt to hide their goal either. And that was the real danger. That evening, she led Chaos and Mercy to the basement, but it wasn't just for storage. It was a miniature training ground, a rubber-lined corridor, mock obstacles, and strobe lighting to simulate chaos. She hit a button. The lights turned red. A dry mechanical tone rang out a simulated alert. Chaos and Mercy instantly shifted posture, backs arched, legs lowered, eyes scanning. "Delta formation," she commanded. They switched positions. Chaos moved ahead, scanning left and right. Mercy fell back, shadowing silently. Amara gripped a rubber training baton and entered the formation. 3 bodies, human and canine, moved in sync, as if still in active deployment, as if the battlefield had never ended. Above them, the city slipped into sleep. Somewhere, over police radio, a voice muttered, "She's not reacting. Nothing suspicious." Another voice answered, "Then make it suspicious." The sky that morning was grayer than usual. Clouds hung low, pressing down on the neighborhood with a heavy, nameless weight. Amara sensed the shift the moment she stepped outside. No one said anything. No sirens wailed, but the air reeked of anticipation, the smell of a plan nearing its reveal. She wore the same outfit, black sweatshirt, tactical leggings, noise-dampening shoes. Chaos and Mercy flanked her, synchronized and silent. The morning air no longer felt fresh. It carried the scent of waiting, of a curtain about to fall. As she passed House 210, Mr. Clifford, the old man who usually watered his lawn, stood still, hose in hand, but the water wasn't running. He glanced at her, eyes narrowing, then turned away. No greeting, no small talk. Amara didn't need words. Just that look. It wasn't the same as yesterday. At the corner, near the old bus stop, she spotted it. The same black SUV, parked on the opposite curb, engine still humming, windows dark. She kept walking, didn't break stride. Chaos flicked an ear. Mercy glanced once, then resumed her blank state. A soft police siren hummed behind her. Not urgent, not aggressive, just a polite tap, like a fingertip knocking on a door. Amara stopped, tightened the leashes slightly. A patrol car rolled to a gentle stop in front of her. The passenger door opened. 2 officers stepped out. Rickson, blonde, blocky, with a naturally abrasive face, and Renner, tall, cold, his gaze never leaving her even when his mouth was speaking elsewhere. "Good morning, ma'am," Rickson spoke first, his voice laced with forced civility. Amara nodded, no smile. "Morning, officers. We've received a few complaints," Rickson continued, pulling out a small notepad as if it made his presence more legitimate. "Some residents claim they've heard late-night dog training. Growling, running, safety concerns. If these animals aren't controlled," Amara stared, unblinking. "This is a gated community. No kids are playing outside at night. I train them in a closed yard with cameras. If needed, we're authorized to inspect the premises," Rickson said, glancing at Renner. "No warrant." Amara's voice sharpened, eyes cooling. "You're not entering my home without legal grounds. We just want a quick look." Rickson stepped forward slightly, tone harder. "For public safety." "Are you working for public safety?" Amara asked. "Or just making sure a black woman doesn't live peacefully in your neighborhood?" Renner finally stepped closer, flashing a thin smile. "You're being overly sensitive, Briggs." Amara tilted her head. "Oh, you remember my name?" "We have files." He shrugged. "And I have a good memory." "Then remember this," she said, taking a half step back and gripping the leashes tighter. "Peace dogs aren't pets, and I'm not prey." Rickson glanced down at Chaos, massive, still, ears taut, back braced, eyes locked. Mercy barely moved, save for a slight twitch of the tail, her only tell of tension. Rickson crouched, feigning friendliness, hand outstretched toward Chaos. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay." The growl wasn't loud, but it stopped Rickson cold. Chaos didn't lunge, didn't bark. He just growled, deep from the chest, like an engine starting far below. "Step back," Amara said, eyes fixed on Renner. "He's holding back. Don't make him choose." Renner raised a hand to halt Rickson. "Enough," then turned back to Amara, voice softening but gaze sharp. "We'll be back. Next time, try being more cooperative." "Next time, bring a lawful reason," she replied. They returned to their vehicle, doors slamming shut. The engine roared, then faded. Amara didn't look back. She stood still, waiting until the sound fully disappeared. Only then did she squeeze the leashes. Chaos relaxed. Mercy stepped closer. She said nothing to them, didn't need to. Back inside, her security system had already flagged the event. Police interaction, alert, level 3. She slid a finger across the control screen, replayed the dialogue, studied each word, each silence. She saved the footage to a hard drive, labeled it by date, and mirrored a copy to an encrypted memory card. Outside, the rain hadn't come, but the wind had changed. She knew that was just the first knock, a soft tap, a test. And men like Renner, if you don't submit, you get labeled. If you don't obey, you get broken. Amara opened her steel cabinet. Inside was an old metal box, heavy. She unlocked it. A worn uniform, a cracked name tag, a weathered leather notebook. First page, "If they start the war, I'll finish it." And that morning, for the first time in years, she unlocked the advanced training module for Chaos and Mercy. Today, they weren't shadows anymore. They had been summoned. After that confrontation, everything on the surface stayed quiet. No summons, no arrests, no nuisance calls from the police department. But Amara knew silence didn't mean it was over. It was preparation. A raid doesn't begin with gunfire. It begins with a meeting. And that meeting had already happened in the third-floor conference room of the Southcrest PD headquarters, where Renner slammed a file onto the table, eyes locked on his superior, Captain Monroe. "She's a liability," Renner said, not loud but hard. "She may not have broken any laws, but this isn't about legality anymore. It's about control." Monroe looked at him, then at Rickson standing in the back, hands in pockets, silent and sullen. "You got anything besides the report?" Renner placed a still from the patrol cam on the table. "Overreaction from the dogs during interaction. Non-compliance. Provocative language. And I believe she has a history of training animals for aggressive behavior." "You believe?" Monroe squinted. "And I'll prove it," Renner replied. The next day, an anonymous complaint landed on the chief's desk. The black woman at the end of Cedar Lane trains her dogs to attack strangers. "I've heard screams at night. I fear for my children." No name, no address, no signature. But attached was a blurry long-distance photo of Chaos mid-jump over a wooden fence in Amara's backyard. Renner filed the document into the system as supplemental surveillance justification. But before that, he did something else. He accessed Amara's military records. He was looking for something, anything that could serve as a wedge to construct the image of a dangerous, unstable, undisciplined threat. He came up empty. Her record was as clean as glass. No infractions, no disciplinary flags. 4 consecutive missions as a K-9 unit lead. 4 commendations. 1 critical injury led to an honorable discharge under a special recovery program. No PTSD markers, no post-combat mental evaluations, nothing. All Renner had was a void, and that void made him furious. At a neighborhood cafe, he approached a woman, blonde, in workout gear, talking on the phone about how "my kid had another nightmare last night." He sat at a nearby table, eased into a soft conversation, and within 10 minutes, he had what he needed, a willing witness. Her name was Eleanor Case. Nothing special, but her house faced Amara's backyard, and she had enough free time to record videos of dogs jumping in a yard. She didn't understand what she saw, but Renner helped her understand. Someone like her doesn't belong here. We need to protect our children. That night, as Amara was checking perimeter sensors, her camera picked up movement out front. A civilian car paused, lights off for 3 seconds, then drove away. 2 people were inside. One took photos. The next morning, Rickson submitted a new report at the admin office. Resident at 314 Cedar Lane, Eleanor Case reports seeing subject Amara Briggs conducting late-night bite training with dogs using human-shaped targets. The attached video shows a dog jumping high, engaging a marked command. The report was sent to the city's civilian complaint office. 48 hours later, an official decision was signed. Temporary special surveillance order. Subject, Amara Briggs. Risk level, medium-high. From that moment, nothing was spontaneous. A drone circled twice nightly. A security vehicle appeared every evening at 9:00 p.m., headlights sweeping the alley. A warning letter was placed in Amara's mailbox, requesting cooperation with a civil investigation to avoid public disturbance. She read every line, hands steady, eyes unblinking. But chaos and mercy, resting on either side of the front door, had already risen when the letter was lifted. The unease in the air spread like static. She didn't need to guess. She didn't need to wait for the knock and a fake warrant. They had chosen the easiest weapon to swallow her. The legal route. That night, she entered her storage room. Inside was a wall-sized board, USB slots labeled Neighbor Watch Footage, intersection time pattern mapping. Every clip is cut precisely, stored in dual formats, backed up on SIM cards, and locked into an offline archive with no remote access. She wasn't just preparing for a legal fight. She was documenting an institutional distortion. She pulled up the audio from the Renner-Rixon encounter, slowed the playback, paused where Rixon said, "provocative language." She typed that phrase into the civil complaint index, returned 0, no record logged. She knew the game. And now she knew this. They were trying to erase the trail, but not fast enough. That night, she sent a coded message to an old node, ginanet@gmail.com. A digital nod. Hours later, across the country, a single line lit up on a black screen. "I'm here, sis." Everyone thought they knew who Amara Briggs was, or at least they thought they did. A quiet black woman, lived with dogs the size of bears, clearly ex-military, probably troubled, definitely private. But what they didn't know were the parts left out of official records. The details were never digitized. The truths erased from every national database. The truth lived overseas, on battlefields where the sand burned like fire and the air reeked of death. That was where Amara once led Delta 12, a Black Ops K-9 unit operating under top-secret clearance, deployed deep into urban territories held by stateless militant groups, places where every step might be a soldier's last. Chaos was only 3 years old then, 35 kilos of muscle and instinct sharper than any drone the U.S. had ever fielded. He wasn't just a sniffer dog like in the movies. He was a biological weapon, trained to read body language, detect cortisol levels in sweat, and react to danger faster than human perception could process. Mercy was different. She didn't charge, didn't growl. She slipped in silently, waited for the signal, then struck the one spot that silenced a man forever. She was a ghost, silent, invisible, fatal. The mission that ended everything was supposed to be a negotiation, a capture op, at worst. They were dropped in at 2:13 a.m. north of Mosul. Their objective? Capture a rebel leader holed up in a 3-story building. No air support, no artillery. In and out. They made it to the second floor before the power was cut, and a single flashlight beam blinked from the supposed ally side, breaking every protocol. Wrong signal. It was a trap. Bullets rained from elevated positions. One teammate took a shot to the throat. Another stepped on a mine. The house became a tomb. Amara didn't hesitate, ordered a fallback. But the radio was dead, and that's when she saw him, the traitor, Echo 2, the man who mapped their ingress, who coordinated their extraction, standing outside, not entering, not calling backup. It was Renner, then a mercenary under a CIA-affiliated shadow outfit. He locked comms, abandoned the team, and later filed no mention of it in his report. Amara couldn't save them all, just herself. Chaos dragged her as blood soaked her thigh. Mercy pressed against her as they lay hidden for 14 hours beneath the house, in a drainage hole, enemy soldiers burning corpses above. When she returned to base, no one asked anything. No apology, just a note. Mission failed due to faulty intelligence. No accountability. She was put on special leave, then honorably discharged on medical terms within 2 weeks. No inquiry, no interviews. No one ever said Echo 2 again. But Amara remembered. And Chaos remembered. Every time he saw a man in a tactical vest holding a map, eyes tilted left, Chaos growled, like it was that night all over again. Mercy never reacted, but she'd always move to the door, waiting for the command. That past, Amara never told Gina, never told anyone, but every scar, every faded medal, every nightmare in a cold room, they still breathed, still whispered. Truth didn't need to be believed, it just refused to stay buried. So when Renner showed up, not in combat gear but wearing a badge of justice, Amara wasn't surprised. She saw the game replaying, but this time, she wasn't caught off guard. She had data, she had training, and she had two warriors, tireless, loyal, unshaken. On her gym table now lay a printout of Renner's file, quietly retrieved by Gina from encrypted servers. Pre-2015 data wiped clean. But Gina had her ways. She found an archived military note. Renner, attached to CIA Joint Unit, 2012, dismissed for tactical disconnection. Military speak for left his team to die. Amara stared at the words, then folded the paper, slipped it into her pocket. She turned to Chaos and Mercy, both seated in front of her like statues, waiting. No whining, no impatience. She said softly, no louder than a breath, "We're going operational." They rose, instantly. No questions, no need to understand. The order had been given. Amara didn't prepare for war the way most people imagine. No flashy weapons, no booby traps, no shouting or bravado. She prepared in silence. Every morning, every step between rooms, every breath through the cold hallway, deliberate, calculated. The house at the end of Cedar Lane was no longer a home. It was a fortress, a maze of defense disguised as routine. Amara didn't live there like a civilian. She operated it like a night guard in enemy territory, every detail intentional. On the ground floor, 8 surveillance cameras rotated asynchronously to avoid forming predictable patterns. Under the windowsills, vibration sensors, calibrated to detect skin temperature and gravitational shifts, utterly silent, no living room TV. Just a gray wall covered in printouts, diagrams, and red ink notes. Officers citing locations, patrol times, suspicious license plates. Below, the basement had become a command center, soundproofed, equipped with an electromagnetic scanner, a triple-layer VPN router, and a handwritten emergency code chart only she and Gina understood. Every day after reviewing the camera feeds, Amara trained for 90 minutes with Chaos and Mercy. No music, no cheerful commands like civilian dog schools. She used her hands, eyes, tone, sometimes just breathe. A whistle 0.75 seconds long meant reposition. A tap on the metal pipe meant threat behind left shoulder. A soft scrape along the granite counter, if held for 2 seconds, meant prepare to retaliate. Don't attack yet. Chaos reacted before the signal ended. Mercy moved as it began. That microsecond gap made them perfect complements. To Amara, they weren't animals, they were sensors, living extensions of her nervous system, a second set of ears, a backup instinct, untouched by doubt. She knew, when war came, there would be no second chance, no rehearsal. When Renner and Rickson moved, it would be swift, brutal. Maybe at 3 a.m., maybe at high noon, all under some respectable excuse the media could sell. So she trained without a clock. Sometimes, just hearing a strange car roll by in the dead of night, she'd rise, whistle once, and Chaos would spring from sleep like a loaded weapon, posted at the door like they were back in Ramadi. Mercy never needed the call. She was already there. Amara turned herself into a machine. Her diet, high protein, no sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol. Her sleep, segmented, 3 hours at night, 2 midday, 30-minute deep rest cycles regulated by heart rate. Each morning, push-ups, wall climbs, rope pulls, laser-simulated shooting in a blacked-out room. She knew Renner wasn't stupid. He wouldn't strike unless he had cover. He'd manufacture justification, frame her as a danger to the community, then send SWAT, all dressed in righteousness. But what he didn't know, the woman he was trying to trap had lived in traps her whole life. Amara grew up in West Baltimore, where sirens didn't mean help. They meant someone disappeared. Every time a car parked outside, her mother couldn't sleep for a month. She'd learned, survival isn't about being right, it's about being ready. And now, she was more ready than ever. On her desk, Gina had just sent an AI-generated patrol route analysis. Conclusion: Amara's house saw 210% more patrol passes than any of the 12 nearest homes. Irrefutable. But Amara wasn't filing lawsuits. Not yet. She knew the law was just a shiny stick. When power wants to crush you, it wraps the stick in gold, then swings. So, instead of filing, she wrote a plan. Codename: Wolves at Gate. A 3-tier strategy: response, retreat, media counterstrike. Each step had coded commands. Each action had an executor. Gina handled data and distribution. Darnell, if he still stood for truth, would be the key to launching an internal investigation. Amara's role? Survive and prove they came to kill her first. That night, under a crescent moon veiled in clouds, she stepped into her backyard. Chaos on her left, mercy on her right. The three of them stood motionless in the dark, her eyes locked on the end of the road where the black SUV sat, lights off. Nothing moved, but she knew they were inside, waiting for a mistake. She smiled. Not in triumph, not in defiance, but like someone who knows this battle wasn't hers to choose, but it would be hers to end. A soft click echoed. Chaos turned. Mercy tensed. Amara didn't go back inside. She just said, "Second formation." The dogs shifted instantly. One moved forward, one fell back, forming a defensive cross angle. Eyes locked on the dark. No barking, no panic, only silence, only readiness. The rain that night wasn't in the forecast. The weather app promised clear skies, but at 2:37 a.m., the first drops began to fall, quiet, unwavering, like an opening act to something irreversible. It wasn't a downpour. It was the kind of rain that seeped into cracks, soaped the wood, and slid down the neck of anyone who knew they were being hunted. And Maria wasn't asleep. She hadn't truly slept since realizing Renner was leading the community patrol. She merely closed her eyes in waves. Heart rate under control, one hand resting on the remote for her sensor array, and the other near a dagger under her pillow. Not because she planned to use it, but because steel, cold, and blood were her primal tether to survival. 241. The vibration sensor on the west side blinked orange. No siren, no public alert, just a soft ping straight to the digital watch on her wrist, followed by motion detected, speed 1.2 m/s, height 5'9", 6 point, distance 3.2 m from perimeter. She rose without turning on the light. No vocal commands, just a single whistle, 0.75 seconds, mid-pitch, and Chaos was already gone from his resting spot, like he'd been waiting for it. Mercy hadn't even needed the sound. She was already at the window. Amara moved to the hidden panel behind the bookshelf, slid her fingers across the touchscreen, and pulled up 4 thermal camera angles. In the blind spot behind the yard, 2 figures, no uniforms. No flashlights, no voices. One was dismantling the fence right at the lowest point, the most obscured spot, where the grass grew a little taller than the rest. He was skilled, fast, scanning like someone trained in recon. But what made Amara freeze for a single breathless second was the second man. He wasn't crouched, not rushing. He stood tall, face raised, eyes locked straight at the camera, like he knew he was being watched. She recognized him. Those eyes. Renner. No badge, no uniform, just black gloves and the gaze of a predator entering uninvited territory. Amara inhaled deeply, slowly. She flipped a switch under the table. Manual defense mode. All lights on the ground floor shut down. The house went black. Outside lights dimmed on a delay, as if simulating a blackout. Only darkness remained. A wooden creaking fence board gives way. Mercy let out a low hiss deep in her throat. Not loud, but enough for Amara to gently press her back. Mercy retreated into the shadow behind the couch. Alice vanished into the side corridor. He knew the underground route that exited near the side path. 304 dot metal scraped the rear lock. No banging, no brute force. They were probing. testing the system, or waiting for the signal. Amara didn't wait. She grabbed a collapsible baton, moved toward the back door, light as mist. A soft click, the secondary lock disengaged. Then silence. 7 seconds passed. No movement, no breathing, no footsteps, no barking. Then the door cracked open just a sliver, just enough for one human eye. Amara didn't strike. She wasn't a fool. She was ready for this moment, the moment someone who thought they controlled everything stepped into the home of someone who once lived in war's shadow. She flipped the emergency switch under the counter. Click. Floodlights exploded on, not soft amber but piercing white, blinding the intruder instantly. Renner staggered back. That was Chaos's cue. He launched from the left, pure muscle in motion, into the man's chest like a battering ram. The second guy didn't even get to scream. Mercy had locked her jaws around his wrist, driving him into the mud, her weight double what it should have been. Amara stood in the kitchen glow. No armor, no gun, just eyes fixed on Renner. "Withdraw," she said. No shout, no threat. A command. Renner pulled a badge from his back pocket, raised it. "You don't have a warrant," she replied, voice steel. "You're trespassing, and I have proof." Renner said nothing. He looked at Chaos, still growling, one hind paw pinning his buddy's ribs. Looked at Mercy, ice in her eyes, not blinking. Looked at Amara. "You'll regret this," he muttered, gravel-voiced, venom thick. "No," she replied. "I've regretted enough already." Renner signaled retreat. Chaos didn't wait for permission. He backed off precisely. Mercy released her hold like a trained assassin, slow and silent. As the door shut, Amara didn't exhale. She locked it by hand, walked back to her control room. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, from adrenaline. She rewound the footage, saved the breach, hit transfer to external drive. One copy for Gina, one to keep. The storm had reached her doorstep, and from that moment on, nothing could go back to the way it was. The air that day was thick like dust clinging to unsolved files. The sun didn't rise fully, just a pale wash of light spilling thinly across rooftops like faded silver. Something was off in the neighborhood. People walked more slowly. No laughter. The usual ring of a kid's bike bell had vanished. By mid-morning, a delivery truck had stopped in front of Amara's house 3 times. No one got out. She knew when an attack is coming, the first sign isn't arrival, it's absence. Absence of sound. Absence of strangers. Absence of watching eyes. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the doorbell didn't ring. Instead, a voice cracked over a megaphone mounted to a command vehicle parked 30 meters away. "Residents of 312 Cedar Lane, this is South Crest Police. We have a court-issued search warrant. Please cooperate. I repeat, we have a search warrant. Open the door." The tone was deliberately measured, neutral, and not aggressive. Just enough authority to legalize what was about to happen. Amara didn't speak. She stood still in the hallway. Chaos crouched near the front door, head low, eyes wide. Mercy lingered in the stairwell shadow, body weightless, like gravity no longer applied. Amara wore her old SEAL uniform, faded, creased, the nameplate A. Briggs stitched over her chest, a torn insignia on her shoulder, proof of a unit that no longer existed. She didn't wear it for symbol. She wore it because they weren't coming for a civilian. They were coming for a warrior. The first knock wasn't a knock. It was the steel butt of a rifle, slamming the door like a threat with legal language. The warrant was repeated. Then the crash. The door blew in, only halfway. A crossbar she'd installed the night before stopped it cold. The breach team pushed. 4 officers entered, armored, masked, rifles up, night vision lenses still mounted. Their lights cut into the dark, then scattered. Amara had painted the interior in reflective material. The beams split, bent, and disoriented. "Clear on 3, clear on 2, move." 1 step, 2. Then one officer was flung backward, launched from the threshold like a body slammed by fate. Chaos had attacked from behind a bookshelf, No bark, only velocity and impact. The second officer didn't get to react. Mercy darted low, locked her jaws around his leg, and pulled him down like gravity made flesh. Amara didn't flinch. She stood at the top of the kitchen steps, remote in hand. "What kind of warrant lets you break without warning?" Her voice was calm, but full. An officer shouted, "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" She stepped into view. "This is my house, and I'm defending it. I have recordings, I have data. Everything you're doing is being documented and will be submitted to court. You're obstructing justice." "What justice?" Her tone didn't waver. "This warrant has no ID, no legal witnesses. No municipal officers were outside this private raid. This is an armed intrusion." Across the street, a phone camera recorded everything. Mrs. Millen, once openly hostile, now stood at her upstairs window, filming, not blinking, not turning away. Amara stepped forward. Chaos shifted back, placing himself between her and the invaders. Mercy still held her grip on the second officer's leg, blood already soaking through his tactical gear. Then Renner stepped in. No helmet, no mask. "But Amara Briggs," he said flatly, "you're under arrest for assaulting officers, harboring dangerous animals, and failure to comply with a legal search." She stared at him like watching a rerun of a mistake history refused to forget. "You're doing it again," she said. "Last time you let soldiers die. This time it'll be your career." Renner's finger pulled the trigger part way, not firing, but enough for the weapon to whine. "Call off your dogs." She looked at Chaos, then Mercy. No words, just a nod. Both retreated in perfect sync, forming a protective triangle. Their muscles eased, but not their eyes. Amara raised her hands. "No weapons, no resistance. You can take me," she said, voice quiet but unshaken. "But you won't erase the truth. Not this time, because now I'm ready." As the cuffs clicked into place behind her, a young officer by the door muttered, "I think we just made a mistake." Renner didn't blink. "Shut up." They escorted Amara out of her home with her hands cuffed behind her back, her head held high, her spine a steel rod beneath her uniform. Her eyes didn't dart or tremble. They locked forward with the unshaken gaze of someone who had memorized the rules long before they were broken against her. There was no fear in her expression, no stammering disbelief, only the kind of silent certainty that comes from living too long in a world where justice arrives late, if at all. She didn't resist. Not because she submitted, but because she had already calculated the outcome. This wasn't panic, it was protocol. Renner followed close, gun still drawn, though now it hung in his grip like a prop he didn't know how to put down. The weapon had no aim anymore, no purpose, just weight. A substitute for authority he feared was slipping. The warrant in his pocket was manufactured, pieced together with language that danced on the edge of legality and contempt. Behind him, the SWAT officers held their assigned posts, feet planted but glances shifting. Their movements were stiff, performative. Windows along the block flickered with movement, faces appeared behind curtains, glass panes, and second-stream blinds. No one called out. No one intervened. But one by one, phones lifted into the air, screens reflecting the slow procession, like mirrors angled toward a lie. Amara stopped at the edge of the porch, not because she was ordered to, but because she decided to. She turned her head slightly and caught the eye of Mrs. Millen, a neighbor who had never spoken a word to her in 5 years. They locked eyes across driveways and shrubs. This time, Mrs. Millen didn't look away. She didn't fumble for dignity or cover her lens. She simply held her phone steady, arm raised, the screen glowing like a blade. Not to cut, to reveal. Amara gave the smallest nod. It was enough. Then she turned, stepping toward the cruiser. Behind her, Chaos stood in the doorway, not making a sound, not moving a muscle, the very image of poised restraint. Mercy crouched beside him, body low, ears forward, muscles coiled in stillness. They made no move to follow. They had been trained for moments like this, the moment when the handler is taken, not in combat, but in ceremony, a process wrapped in laws that didn't protect her, but their eyes never blinked, and what their mouths didn't say, their memory kept. Exact, permanent. The cruiser pulled away with no lights, no sirens, quiet, as if the silence would erase the act itself. But silence had already become a myth. It no longer served as a shield or a veil. Noise didn't need sirens anymore. It lived in circuits. It traveled on waves. It landed in inboxes and chat threads faster than a cruiser could reach downtown. Within 12 minutes, the first video hit the local neighborhood group chat. Black woman arrested. Dogs didn't resist. The clip was short, but it said everything. A faded, ununiformed figure being placed into the car under a silver sky, with 2 dogs at the door, watching, motionless, witnesses with no need for speech. 30 minutes later, on the other side of the country, Gina's phone buzzed once. She was mid-coffee, mid-scone, when she saw the alert. Briggs, detained. Activate level 2. She didn't pause. She didn't need to think. Everything was prepped. She launched the countermeasure, time-stamped footage of the illegal entry, audio glitches that conveniently missed Miranda rights. Renner's voice, issuing unlawful commands, caught in raw waveforms. The packet was clean, encrypted, and AI verified. Each file has an arrow with a name carved in its shaft. Meanwhile, in Southcrest, inside a holding cell that smelled faintly of bleach and stale paper, Amara sat alone. No one spoke to her, no charges read, just the hum of fluorescent lights, too bright, and a chair too cold. The door slammed every few minutes, not out of necessity, but performance. Renner thought the waiting would grind her down. That time was a weapon, but what he didn't understand was that Amara had survived longer silences than this. She had slept beside mortars. She had watched friends bleed into dirt. Time was not pressure, it was familiar. Her stillness wasn't surrender, it was discipline. She sat upright, not slouched, not hunched. She stared at the corner camera and said nothing, but her silence carried an edge sharper than any scream. It reached outward, not as a plea, but proof. Her sharpest weapon wasn't her voice, it was her presence. It was the way she held herself, unbroken, in a place designed to make people small. By mid-afternoon, anonymous tips hit journalists' inboxes. Screens lit up in newsrooms. Editors whispered, "Are we sure this is real?" And then came a second clip, not from the raid, from the moment before it, chaos at the door. Mercy was poised like stone, and Amara's voice, clear and direct, "They're arresting me because of my skin, not because of a crime." The footage was grainy, the audio is imperfect, but it was enough. Hashtag justice for Briggs. It surged by dusk. A retired SEAL posted, "She saved my life overseas. She's not dangerous. Look again. Who's the real threat?" Renner read that post alone. He gripped his phone so hard that the screen flexed. His knuckles paled. His jaw locked like a rusted bolt. "Who leaked that video?" He barked at Captain Monroe, but Monroe didn't answer. His silence said more than any reply. His face had already begun to shift, not out of defiance, but inevitability. Renner was no longer the room's center of gravity, and he knew it. 1 hour later, Amara's lawyer walked into the station. He wasn't sent by her. He was sent by Darnell. Quiet, internal, the man who had waited in the shadows for this precise moment. "You don't have to speak," the lawyer said, placing a folder gently on the table. "You'll be out in 4 hours. But the video is live. This isn't just about you anymore." Amara didn't speak. She didn't nod. She didn't shift. She just sat, still upright, in a room built to reduce people, and didn't shrink an inch. Her eyes looked past the walls, as if seeing something that stretched far beyond brick and badge. Maybe she was remembering desert sand, maybe the smell of gun oil on gloves, or maybe she was simply reminding herself what survival looks like. She wore her uniform, and let the truth walk in behind her. At 7:26 p.m., the cell door unlocked. No announcement, no apology. She stepped out into a twilight street lined not with applause but with phones raised like torches. No chants, No chaos, just quiet power. Each lens caught her steps. Each recording of a wound turned into a witness. Chaos met her at the halfway mark, pressing his head into her palm. Mercy circled behind her, guarding her blind spot like they always had. From the edge of the block, Renner stood and watched. His gun was lowered, his mouth silent, and it hit him then. Not during the breach, not in the cell, but now. As she said nothing at all, he had already lost. And worse, he knew, and hadn't even started yet. As Amara stepped through the wooden gate into her yard, the evening light filtered down like soft silver dust, catching in her hair and settling across the damp ground in dappled glints. The rain from earlier still clung to the soil, darkening it in uneven patches that softened under her boots. The air was cool now, edged with the clean bite of oncoming night, and behind her the sky was the color of burned slate. Chaos walked beside her with unhurried precision, his ears tuned to the slightest shift. Mercy moved a few steps ahead, nose lowered, scanning the base of the wall the way a soldier rechecks a cleared perimeter, not out of fear, but habit, born of memory. The front door still bore the damage from the morning raid, a deep, ugly crescent dented where Rickson's boot had landed, a violent, graceless wound. The hinge on the right had buckled inward by nearly 2 centimeters. It groaned faintly now when the wind moved through. Amara hadn't fixed it, not yet. She'd walked past it twice already and said nothing. She let it sit there like a scar someone else tried to leave on her home. A visible fracture, a warning to them and a reminder to herself. Not every wound needed stitching. Some were meant to remain open, as markers. This was the first tear in the surface of silence, a tear she no longer intended to hide. Inside, the house was still, not untouched, but intact. The lights had stayed off, but the security system had already rebooted the moment she stepped over the threshold. No errors, no latency. Signal strongly, logs unbroken. Gina had patched the network remotely, even while Amara was still in holding, along with one small, weighty file. Raw footage from the raid. No police uniforms, no warrant, just the unfiltered tension of a door breached, and voices that never shouted, just growled, demanded, and denied. Amara's voice, level and unshaken, broke through the stillness on the recording. I have proof. She sat at the control desk and opened the folder. Her fingers moved with deliberate care, as if sorting weapons. Each file came alive in cold clarity. Surveillance timestamps, body cam fragments, angles from exterior cams, metadata locked to unaltered logs. Not curated, not dramatized, just clean, surgical, illegal surveillance, unlawful entry. Escalation is documented in digital ink. Everything cross-verified, everything admissible. Not a story, a reckoning. Gina's voice cut in over the encrypted line. Clear, fast, clipped like a scalpel in a gloved hand. Sis, full data package is live on 3 platforms. 2 have already been flagged by human rights orgs and a federal oversight office. AI macked. Your name's buried 10 levels deep. No metadata trace. It's picking up traction. 36 hours, maybe less, before someone tries to bury. Amara didn't answer right away. She turned her head toward Chaos, who watched her in absolute stillness. Mercy settled at the base of the stairs, eyes half-lidded but alert. Above the desk, the precinct floor plan stared back at her. A mosaic of intent. Red circles marked every blind spot. Yellow lines traced access tunnels. Blue squares indicated boxed archive rooms with no network connection. What about Plan B? She asked. Gina paused on the other end. Then simply, Plan B is Darnell. She nodded once. No further explanation was needed. Darnell had been the one who pulled her out of the holding cell. Internal affairs hiding in plain sight for years, watching Renner, gathering fragments. But knowledge alone meant nothing, not in a world where silence was strategy and suspicion didn't survive on paper. What Darnell needed was permission. Amara had given it. 4 minutes of unbroken footage, plus redacted patrol logs showing repeated stops near one address. Hers. She sent the bundle. No note, no handshake, no chase, just 20 minutes later, Her second inbox blinked once. One new message, one encrypted subject line, one sentence inside. You were never alone. Across town, Darnell opened the file, and with it, permission. Inside Southcrest PD, the air was stale, and flickering overhead fluorescents cast everything in a sick green pallor. Renner sat at his desk, rubbing at his temple. But it wasn't the lights that gave him a headache. The press had caught wind. A legal watchdog blog had posted a forensic breakdown of the footage. 3 dense pages cite federal statute, time-stamped violations, excessive force, and racial targeting. Over 2,000 comments in the first hour, half outraged, half unsure. The worst kind of fire, one burning without a clear target. Only heat. He stared at Amara's file. Her face stared back. Her military record, stills from surveillance, movement patterns mapped like a threat profile. He'd thought she was predictable, a wounded veteran with ghosts, muscle, and instinct, but he'd misread it. He wasn't cornering a soldier, he was triggering a system. Amara wasn't loud, she was deliberate. She didn't fight with the noise. She waited for silence to show its cracks, and then let data do the rest. That evening, as the street lamps flickered on down Cedar Lane, a new post surfaced on the local community board. A photo. Amara on her porch, wearing her faded SEAL uniform. Chaos and Mercy are seated on either side, both facing the camera. Not posing, not aggressive, just present. A trio defined by posture alone. No smile, no filter, no caption needed, but one was there. If you come, at least bring the truth. The image traveled, not in viral bursts, but with purpose. It showed up on pinned boards, church doors, and taped inside coffee shop windows, not as a protest, not even as a warning, but as a line drawn with quiet resolve. Amara was no longer just the woman at the end of the block. She was now the one you didn't underestimate. Renner saw it. He laughed, a bitter, short sound, but it wasn't a victory laugh. It was the sound of a man realizing, too late, he hadn't picked a fight with a name. He'd tried to break a memory that refused to die. He'd gone after a veteran with nothing left to lose, and everything left to prove. And worse still, he had handed her the one thing she never needed to ask for, an audience. The next morning began with an unusual stillness, the kind that made the skin prickle long before the mind registered what was wrong. The sky hung low with a dense overcast, and the pale gray light that spilled through the windows seemed unsure of itself, as if hesitant to touch the floor. No wind, no rustling leaves, no bird song. Even the distant hum of the city felt like it had been turned down to a whisper. It was as if the world was holding its breath. Amara woke before dawn, eyes snapping open in one fluid motion. No alarm, no clock. Just instinct, honed by years of listening not for sound but for the absence of it. Her breath was calm, controlled. Her body knew what her mind was still catching up to. Chaos lay beside her on the floor, tense but still, golden eyes reflecting ambient light like warning signals. Mercy stood in the hallway, ears tilted forward, unmoving, gaze fixed on the front door as if waiting for it to blink. No barking, no sound, but readiness radiated from the silence like heat rising off asphalt. At 6:02 a.m., the first cruiser rolled into position at the far end of the street, its tires crunching gravel that had never seemed so loud. At 6:17, a second vehicle pulled in quietly, parking 3 houses down. At 6:29, a black SUV pulled up, its windows tinted, unmarked, silent in a way that was louder than any siren. Renner and Rickson stepped out, both in plain clothes, their jackets too heavy for the mild air, their gait controlled, but telling. They weren't here for a chat. The weapons they carried weren't holstered as a precaution. They were intended, made visible. Mara didn't lock the door. She never did when it mattered. Instead, she stood in the living room, coffee in hand, steam curling into the air like a quiet exhale. She watched them on the gate cam feed, still, as if carved from the wall behind her. Rickson reached for the weapon at his hip, not drawn, but touched, a warning dressed as reflex. She stepped out onto the porch, her breath condensing slightly in the cool air, still wearing her old uniform, sleeves rolled, collar faded, hair tied back, face bare. "What is it this time?" she asked, voice flat, polished with resolve. Rickson didn't speak. Renner did. He held up a document, official, impersonal. "Summons. You're required to answer for obstruction of law enforcement." Amara didn't move to take it. "Which part of which video shows obstruction?" Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. Renner offered no answer, just a shrug masked as a smirk. "I'm not here to debate. You comply or we escalate." Chaos stepped out beside her then, not aggressive, just present, unblinking, locked onto Rickson like gravity had singled him out. "Escalation leads to what none of us need," Amara said calmly, "and you'll be wiping footage again. This time we're recording everything," Ranner said, signaling with a tilt of his head. Rickson stepped forward. That was his mistake. His hand reached for her arm. In a moment shorter than thought, chaos launched. No bark, no warning, just pure kinetic intention. He struck Rickson in the chest with both front paws, a targeted blow, knocking him clean off balance and onto the porch tiles. The fall wasn't loud, but it landed like a statement. His sidearm clattered across the floor, a sound too sharp for the silence that had come before. Renner drew his weapon, but his arm never made it past his shoulder. Amara moved. Pivot, shoulder drop, grip shift. Wrist lock. It was clean, silent, and practiced. The barrel of Renner's gun now pointed at the ground, inches from his boot. His breath caught, sweat beaded. His balance shifted, but not forward. Chaos planted himself between them like a wall. No barking, just a low, sustained growl, vibrating like an engine that had no intention of shutting off. Mercy appeared from the side, sliding into position at the back corner of the porch, not attacking, just sealing the exit. 7 seconds. That was all it had taken. Rickson lay winded, staring at the sky. Renner knelt, hands empty, pulse visible in his neck. The porch held its breath again, but it wasn't still. It was charged. Amara's voice broke the moment, not loud but deliberate, aimed not just at the two men, but at the neighborhood now waking up. Windows creaked. Curtains shifted. Phones were lifted behind glass. "I've been patient," she said. "I've been silent. I've given evidence, and still you come here as if law is something you can tailor to fit your will." Renner tried to speak, but she raised her hand. Chaos ceased, growling, lowered to a watchful stance. Mercy didn't move. "I don't need to prove I'm innocent anymore," she continued. "I only need to prove that you're violating the law, and today, every second of it is being recorded." A neighbor from House 306 stepped onto her porch, holding up her phone. The live stream title, "Police back at Briggs' house. Watch what happens." Renner hesitated. He felt the shift, felt the camera on him, the eyes behind the blind. No deletion this time, no edits, no private memos, no clean sweep. "Fall back," he muttered, voice low. "Temporary." Rickson stood without a word. Renner left without another glance. Amara stayed where she was, steady, the air around her no longer quiet, but razor-sharp. Chaos stretched out at the threshold, paws crossed like a sentinel at rest. Mercy disappeared inside without a sound. The door clicked shut behind them. It wasn't calm, it was war readiness, dressed in the skin of routine. 3 hours later, the video reached 300,000 views. The turning point wasn't the scuffle or the gun. It was the moment. Chaos growled and Amara said, "The law is not something you tailor to fit your own will." From Washington, D.C., a veterans advocacy group posted, "Amara Briggs is not a threat. She's proof that justice can stand alone, and still stand strong." Renner sat in a dimly lit briefing room, watching the footage loop on screen. His face stared back, sweating, off-center, unarmed. And in that frozen image he finally understood. The narrative had slipped out of his grip, and worse, resistance had only just begun. When a system of power is wounded, it does not curl in like a dying creature. It expands, restructures, and begins to destroy anything that caused the pain. Truth, when left uncontrolled, becomes the sharpest blade, and now that blade had cut into the flesh of Southcrest law enforcement apparatus. The videos of Amara were no longer just a local incident. They had spread wider, picked up by major news outlets, shared by veterans, and turned into a symbol by civil rights groups. And when a black former SEAL was assaulted by armed police on his property in broad daylight with neighbors filming as witnesses, it was no longer small, no longer internal, no longer something that could be ignored. Renner was the first to feel the pressure, but he didn't panic. He snapped. Within 48 hours of the clip going public, he called more than 10 internal meetings. He demanded that videos showing his face be taken down. He threatened to sue hosting platforms for failing to remove content endangering officers in active duty. But what he didn't understand was, once an image reaches the deepest part of public outrage, no law, no algorithm can trap it again. So he pivoted. If the crowd couldn't be silenced, the narrative had to be flipped. He began constructing a new version of Amara, not a hero, but a threat. He dug through every page of her records, every old article, every closed report, hunting for a crack. No criminal history, no lawsuits, no mental illness, no accusations of violence. But like many in the system, he decided if there's no stain, smear one. Rickson was ordered to falsify reports. In the updated internal file, Amara Briggs was now red-flagged with a note, former Rapid Response Combat Unit, history of post-conflict psychological friction, uncooperative in civilian engagements, potential for volatile reaction. Every word, every line, crafted carefully, blending truth with distortion so the reader could not tell which was which. That is how the system survives, not by erasing truth, but by drowning it in selectively curated trash. Next came media. A leaked news bite appeared on a local station. Police are investigating alleged attack dog training activity by former soldier Amara Briggs, who has a history of non-compliance in civilian operations and was once flagged for suspicious conduct in the Middle East. No sources, no evidence, just a close source. But viewers didn't need proof, they needed a label. And now, she had one. Danger. Amara watched the report that evening, seated in front of the screen with chaos and mercy. Her face didn't change, her eyes held no anger, but the stillness in her upright posture said something else. Not fear, but recognition. She knew this was how the system would respond. It had done the same to her teammates, to those who told the truth, to journalists, even to white people who dared to stand beside her skin. She picked up the phone and called Gina. Start scanning media servers. Look for links tied to police accounts. What next? Gina asked. Her voice now changed, not light, not joking, a programmer bearing her claws. Amara answered with 3 words. We strike back. At the Southcrest Police Department, Darnell, the internal investigator, was reviewing footage. He knew Renner well. They had worked together for 3 years. Darnell had once watched him cover up the beating of a black teenager in custody by altering the timestamp. It was also Renner who buried legal complaints under the clause of actions taken under high stress. But this time was different. This time, Renner wasn't just suppressing people, he was digging his own grave. Darnell didn't call Amara. He sent an encrypted email. Inside were just 2 lines. Renner is scrubbing evidence. I'll hold a copy for you. Send me everything you've got. Amara didn't reply. She just hit send all. Over 50 data files, audio clips, video, images, AI analysis, patrol schedule anomalies. Everything transferred in 7 minutes. 1 hour later, Renner walked into Darnell's office and placed a folder on the desk. I heard you've been digging through old footage. I have, Darnell replied, not looking up. Careful, Renner said. Sometimes looking too deeply into the past makes you forget who controls the present. Maybe, Darnell smirked. But if the present's filthy, people turn to the past to clean it, Renner said. He just stared at him, then walked out. And in that moment, as the door closed, Darnell knew Renner was afraid. At the same time, Gina received an alert. Amara's online account had been mass reported. The system flagged over 20 IP addresses submitting takedown requests for all posts mentioning Briggs. We're about to be choked, she said over the phone. No, Amara replied. They're proving they're weak. And just as she predicted, that move triggered a new wave. Netizens began resharing the videos more than ever. The hashtag #UnbowedBriggs started trending. Veterans published open letters in defense magazines. One of her former instructors posted, "If I ever trusted my life to someone in the field, it was Briggs." Southcrest began to crack, like the old paint on a brittle wall. Locals called a public meeting, demanding answers from the department. Major networks started sending reporters, and while the system scrambled to patch each leak with structured lies, the truth had already slipped beyond the edge of data. This was no longer the story of one arrested woman. It had become a nation's question: who truly gets to live free? Renner walked into the internal briefing room wearing a gray suit and the worn posture of a man who used to believe he was untouchable. But the air had shifted. No handshakes, no nods, just glances, tight, unreadable from subordinates, thinly veiled disdain from former allies, and direct, silent suspicion from Darnell, who remained seated, unmoved, as Renner entered. On the table in front of him lay a printed mission report, old, supposedly scrubbed from military databases nearly a decade ago, but one line hadn't been redacted. Echo 2, CIA detail, comms lead. Link failure, no response. Renner's fingers twitched at his shirt's button. Darnell noticed. He said nothing at first, just slid another file across the table. This one was thicker. Movement logs, behavioral analysis, and archived contractor records. A perfect match. No ambiguity, no deniability. "You left a unit behind in Mosul," Darnell said, voice soft, deadly. "You let them die to clear your exit, then came back and put on a badge." Renner didn't deny it. He only smirked. "No one lived to say otherwise." "One did," Darnell replied. "Briggs." The name landed like a gavel, not as a target, but as a witness, a survivor. Renner leaned back, crossing his arms. "And what will you do? Take it to command? With a deleted op file, unregistered audio, the word of a black woman against a decorated officer?" "No," Darnell said, opening his laptop. "I'm making it public." On screen, a folder. Inside it, the audio from Amara's standoff with Renner, matched by voice recognition to Echo 2's last comms before her unit went dark. Renner didn't argue. He stood, walked out without a word. But his silence admitted everything. Across town, in a dim warehouse turned digital war room, Amara and Gina assembled the last pieces. Audio, video, infrared, patrol data, a timeline now sharpened into a blade. From the break-in to the unlawful arrest, to Renner's fabricated reports, and finally to his hidden role in a mission gone cold in Mosul. Gina stared at the screen, then at her sister. "It was him," she said. "Amara, she didn't have to. He thought he could bury it in protocol," she said. "But I don't carry a law. I carry memory." Gina sent the full dossier to 3 press outlets: New York, Atlanta, and an international military journal. A backup went to a human rights watchdog, with one damning summary. The head of Southcrest Patrol once abandoned his unit on foreign soil and now seeks to erase the only one who remembers. The media ignited. The traitor Echo 2 lit up headlines. Renner's mercenary records were compared frame by frame with his police ID. Veterans spoke out. One anonymous post surfaced from a soldier long presumed dead. "We were left behind. I lived because Briggs and her dogs didn't give up." Southcrest issued no comment. Renner was summoned to an emergency hearing. He never arrived. By 4:33 p.m., his personnel file had been wiped from the system. No exit log, no resignation, just silence. Darnell found the deletion in real time. Amara didn't react when she heard. She already knew. When someone like Renner loses control, he doesn't vanish. He stalks. And this time, he wouldn't come with a badge or a plan. He'd come like a ghost from war. That night, when the lights in Gina's warehouse shifted amber, her preset warning for a breach attempt, Amara didn't panic. She strapped on her sidearm, slipped a data drive into her jacket, and called for chaos and mercy. "He's coming," she said, voice steady. "But this time, I'm not the prey." Gina's voice trembled. "We've sent it all. Even if you say, I won't let him win," Amara interrupted. "Not this time, not ever again." Outside, the wind picked up, streetlights flickered, and somewhere in the dark, the man who abandoned her unit had returned. Not as law, not as command, but as what he'd always been beneath the uniform. A threat, a predator, a war that never ended. News about Renner spread like wildfire in the middle of a drought. No longer were there vague insinuations or leaked rumors. It was bold headlines, block letters, and sharp images of him in an old uniform, standing on the fringe of a long Ago battlefield with a crooked smile. The photos, extracted from military archives and paired with testimony from 3 surviving veterans, reconstructed the entire betrayal campaign in Mosul, where Echo 2 not only abandoned, but deliberately cut communication to withdraw alone, to preserve his separate deal with a private CIA affiliate. Southcrest could no longer stay silent. Sheriff Monroe's office issued an emergency press conference. He stood in front of the cameras with a gray, drawn face and bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, delivering an 8-minute speech that repeated the phrase, "We will take this seriously," over and over. But those words slipped past the ears of the public. They didn't want reassurances. They wanted the truth, and they wanted it now. In a small office at the end of the hallway, Darnell sat before 6 monitors, each displaying a different data stream, leaked internal emails, patrol schedules, traces of Renner's access activity before his disappearance. The police department's internal server system began to show instability, not from external hackers, but because someone inside was trying to erase trails. Darnell plugged in his headphones and opened the audio file. A call between Renner and someone named Victor, a deep voice layered with the rumble of passing trucks. In it, Renner clearly said, "If the system crashes, I need at least every financial link between me and the La Protocol Fund gone." Victor simply replied, "You don't get it. Money won't save you anymore." Moments later, Darnell received an encrypted message from Gina. "We go in. Tonight. Need you to open the gate from inside." Attached was a schematic of the police headquarters, the fastest route to the central server room, and 3 checkpoints to bypass. Darnell looked at the map, then at the name tag on his chest. This was no longer an internal investigation. This was an operation. In the makeshift warehouse, now converted into a tactical room, Amara wore an old bulletproof vest, hair tied back tight. Chaos and Mercy already fitted with tracking devices and low-frequency comms. Gina was dressed in black, thin gloves on her hands, headset linked to a private server housed in a truck 2 blocks away. They weren't waiting for authorization. They planned it themselves, and they moved as if other people's lives depended on it. At 11:04 p.m., they moved. Darnell unlocked the gate from inside at 11:17 p.m., using high-level access as an internal affairs investigator. The north side service door opened silently. No one saw them enter. Chaos led, Mercy followed, and Amara was in the center. Each step stirred memories. Nights in Afghanistan, blood-slick hallways, and unnamed bases where rules didn't apply. But this time, the enemy wasn't insurgents. It was uniforms, badges, and a blackened network. They reached the 3rd floor undetected. A security guard sat at the control desk. Darnell walked over, holding a coffee cup, chatting like it was any other night. Within 15 seconds, the guard was convinced it was just another routine shift. Meanwhile, Gina bypassed the camera system, distorting the footage using a wave-bending interference code. No one on the security network knew an operation was unfolding right in their core. The server room door required a unique code. Darnell entered 3 combinations, each one pulled from internal personnel files. The door unlocked. Within 2 minutes, Gina inserted a device that extracted all data from the past 3 years. Email logs, patrol schedules, budget expenditures, weapons distribution lists, and most critically, the hidden account called La Protocol that Renner had used to receive payments from an unidentified fund tied to a private defense contractor. As the download completed, an internal alarm went off. A guard had noticed the door was open without authorization. Darnell spoke first. "Tech is running a systems check," but time was up. They had to move. Amara gave the command, "Echo exit." Mercy led. Chaos covered the rear. They moved, not like fugitives, but like a tactical unit, executing a controlled withdrawal. No collisions, no arrests, no traces. When the truck shot out of the admin zone at 12:42 a.m., all the data was secured in a cold drive, ready to be released. 3 hours later, Gina launched the final blow. The complete Renner files, videos, financial proof, forged warrants, falsified reports, uploaded to a decentralized media platform, immune to takedowns. Alongside it, a video of Amara stepping out of the police station with the caption, "When the system hides crimes, justice walks barefoot." And the internet exploded. Renner the Traitor hit #1 in trending topics. Federal investigative units opened cases. Renner's accounts were frozen. Officers who had signed fake reports were summoned one by one. The network had begun to collapse, not by bombs or bullets, but by truth placed in the right hands. The night sky was thick, like a layer of spilled oil. No moon, no stars. Just a weight of darkness pressing down on the quiet streets of Southcrest like a warning only those who had lived through war could understand. Amara sat in the back of an old truck, behind her 2 equipment crates, a disassembled Glock, and a waterproof printed map folded with the precision of a ritual before an assault. She didn't look out the window. She looked directly into Chaos's eyes. No orders, no words exchanged. Just one glance between warriors. Mercy lay beside them, breathing softly, unmoving, eyes blinking slowly as if fully prepared for every possible outcome, including the one where no one came back. The truck stopped at the 3rd intersection north of City Police Headquarters, a sprawling administrative complex with 3 stories above ground, 1 underground level, and a security system so tight any thief would turn back after the first line of its specs. But Amara wasn't a thief, and her target wasn't a safe. It was data. She stepped out, pulled her hood low, and slid an earpiece into her right ear. Gina's voice came through. "3rd floor lighting is down to minimum. You have 15 minutes before the system loops back into the next check cycle." Amara tapped the mic gently. "Copy." Darnell had done his part. He was the silent charge buried in the system, cracking locks, rerouting the camera feeds, and disabling the infrared sweep in the maintenance zone. And the rest was up to Amara. She moved through the alley behind the building to a side entrance where the fingerprint scanner had been temporarily disabled. A new electronic lock had been installed, but Gina had located the control schematic from an old blueprint buried on the construction firm's server. Amara used a device no larger than a portable hard drive, plugged it into the emergency USB slot beneath the control panel, and waited for the light to turn green. A soft click followed. The door opened. No alarm. She slipped into the hallway without rushing. Every movement was timed to the sensor's blind spots. Chaos and Mercy followed tight. No heavy breathing, no brushing the walls. Every turn, every shadow, every step was a move through a kill zone. One mistake wouldn't mean failure. It would mean death. The 3rd hallway led to the internal stairwell. A wide-angle camera was mounted there. Amara stopped and pressed the mic. "Gina, rotate 20 degrees right. Blur the image stream by 15 frames." "On it," Gina replied, voice steady like a machine. "You've got 6 seconds to cross. Starting now." Amara passed like a ghost. Chaos followed. Then Mercy. Once all 3 were through, Gina exhaled into the headset. "Clear." No one saw a thing. The 2nd floor was the target. Inside were 2 rooms. One storing physical records, not yet digitized. Hard copy signatures, discarded complaints, manually edited reports. The other, a secondary data center holding internal backups, in case the main system suffered a cyber attack. These were encrypted the old-school way, trusted by the old guard. No automated algorithms, but physical key codes, segregated files, accessible only by top leadership. Amara went straight into the physical records room first. The door was locked with a mechanical latch. She used a stiff wire, slid it under the handle, and bent it slightly. The lock popped open without a sound. Inside, the smell of damp paper and old ink hit her like a dust cloud from years untouched. She opened the 3rd drawer, labeled Set 3 to S6. She found the file with code S3.214, a complaint of Rickson's use of force in a residential area back in 2019. It had never been processed. Behind it was Monroe's report, approval for no investigation. Reason, Lack of evidence, unconvincing complaint. She pulled the file and stuffed it into her pocket. Next were resignation letters from 3 officers who had worked under Renner. Note: voluntary. But the signatures were all the same handwriting. Each paper file was a nail in the coffin of the reputation they had built. After gathering the documents, she moved to the data room. Unlike the record room, this one was guarded by 2 layers of codes and an infrared camera, but Darnell had already sent the code. She keyed it in quickly: 614829 Delta. The door beeped, unlocked. The room was dark, quiet, lit only by the soft blue glow of hundreds of LED lights on the server racks. Gina guided her through the rows. Drive number 12, row C, bottom shelf. Pull the Ghost Report archive file and a duplicate of the internal transfer account. Amara followed. Every motion was steady like breath, no errors. Within 3 minutes, the drive was pulled, the data transferred into a mobile device encrypted by Gina. A backup was instantly uploaded via satellite to 3 neutral servers in Iceland, Ukraine, and Canada. If anyone found out and tried to erase it, everything had already tripled and couldn't be recalled. Then a red light blinked. Someone was in the hallway, an early shift swap. Amara signaled for Chaos to hold. Mercy slid along the wall. She hid behind the door. A patrol officer passed by. No suspicion, no discovery, but his hand went to his earpiece saying something. Gina whispered, "You've got 30 seconds. Upper floor just started a routine check." Amara tapped her earpiece. "Move Echo 3. She withdrew the way they came, but at the bend she led the team into the maintenance route, a ventilation duct mapped by Darnell from a 15-year-old building plan. It led to the basement, where an unused emergency exit still had a working door that hadn't been welded shut. They slid through the duct, down a sloped metal chute. Chaos landed first, soft as sand falling. Mercy followed, silent. Amara came last, breathing steadily. By the time they exited the building, it was raining. Not a storm, a steady, quiet rain. Enough to wash away footprints in the dirt, enough to blur thermal cameras. They got in the truck. The data was secure, the proof was in their hands. No one was injured. No one knew they had entered, and the system was no longer untouchable. Gina had never trembled while writing malicious code, but that night her hand shook as she hit send, not out of fear but from knowing there was no way back. When the data package was decrypted and delivered to 3 major news platforms accompanied by an open letter written in cold, logical, emotionless language, that was the moment the power network surrounding Southcrest began to tremble, like an ancient structure with its foundation shattered. The headlines appeared everywhere by early morning. Internal evidence reveals Southcrest police altered reports, accepted illegal funding, and hid the identity of a treasonous ex-mercenary. The articles included surveillance images capturing Renner's unauthorized entry, wire transfers from a private organization called L Protocol to his secret account, and sworn testimonies from 2 former officers confirming they were coerced by Renner into falsifying complaints. The media erupted like a wildfire that couldn't be contained. What was once whispered in police hallways became national headlines. The NBC morning show opened with a short feature on the woman and her 2 dogs who made the system bow. The host called her the Justice Warrior, but the people of Southcrest had a simpler name, Amara, the one who wasn't afraid. Amara didn't appear on television. She gave no interviews. She only released a 90-second clip, filmed at home, no effects, no edits. In it, she wore a plain shirt, stood before a wall of taped evidence, and spoke slowly. "I'm not against police. I'm against those who wear the badge to avoid the law. This isn't revenge. This is survival. And this time, I'm not surviving alone." The video hit 3 million views in 8 hours. Darnell, from the small office where he had once quietly compiled evidence, received offers from 3 major media outlets for exclusive interviews. He declined them all. Instead, he posted a short blog entry that simply read, "The truth doesn't need to be grand, it just needs not to be buried." Sheriff Monroe could no longer remain silent. Under pressure from the media and public outrage, he was forced to initiate a high-level internal investigation. supervised by a civil rights group and the Department of Justice. 8 officers were suspended. 3 others resigned voluntarily. One posted on social media, "I used to believe in Renner. Now I believe in Amara." But the victory didn't come because the public got angry. It came because data doesn't lie. Among the released materials was a critical file, a recording of a conversation between Renner and a high-ranking official from the financial shell tied to L Protocol. In it, Renner requested a cleanup, erase transaction records, and lock down all traces in the system. The voice on the other end replied, "We can't help you when the spotlight's already on your face. You played it too big." That tape wasn't just evidence against Renner. It was a sentence for the entire network of cover-ups, lies, and profiteering behind the curtain of public safety. It proved that when a lone person has enough persistence, enough skill, and enough truth, she can dismantle a structure built on privilege. Amara didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. After the video spread everywhere, she returned to her room, removed her uniform, and placed it in a small wooden box she had kept since leaving the military. She dusted it off, folded it carefully, and set her faded name tag on top, A. Briggs. She stepped onto the porch, stood silently in the dawn light, a gentle breeze brushing her shoulder. Chaos and Mercy lay beside her, not leaving her side. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. There was nothing more to say. Every word that needed saying had been recorded. Every crime that needed exposing had been revealed. Every old wound now stood as evidence. 2 days later, during a press conference, Sheriff Monroe did not mention Amara by name, but at the end of his speech, he paused for a few seconds, then said, "We misjudged a citizen, and that mistake cannot be covered by authority." At the same time, Darnell was appointed head of the independent task force, reviewing the entire internal record system. In his first statement, he simply said, "I'm not here because I've never been wrong. I'm here because I met someone who never stopped seeking what's right." 1 day later, Chaos and Mercy were honored by a veterans organization for protecting their handler and acting professionally under threat. There was no grand ceremony, no oversized plaque, just a photo of the two sitting beside Amara, captioned, "Not war dogs, war comrades." Southcrest began to change. Previously dismissed complaints were reopened. A civilian oversight board was formed to monitor police activity. The lessons from Briggs became part of the new training standard. But to Amara, it was all just the inevitable aftermath. No miracles. No heroes. Only data, when placed in the right hands, becomes an unstoppable weapon, and she had learned to wield it like a gun. In those days, the city of Southcrest didn't resemble any memory still lingering in the minds of its longtime residents. The streets were still clean, the buses still ran on time, but something had changed, something undeniable in the eyes. The eyes of citizens turned when they saw patrol cars, the eyes of officers as they entered the station, the eyes of children walking past the police headquarters. All of them carried a heavy silence, as if the city had seen something it could never unsee. Renner vanished from the radar for 4 days. No emails, no calls, no mention in any internal report, and no one knew exactly where he was until the morning of the 5th day, when he suddenly appeared in the press room on the 2nd floor of the Southcrest Police Department, flanked by a private legal team, wearing a new suit, his hair slicked back and his face stripped clean of 30 years of battlefield dust. He wasn't there to surrender, he was there to speak. The microphone turned on, cameras aimed straight at his face. Reporters packed tight, flashes snapping in rhythm like the frantic pulse of a body on the edge of a stroke. Renner opened with familiar lines. "I am a soldier. I have served this country under conditions no one in this room could begin to imagine. I have made difficult decisions, but not one of them was for personal gain. Every choice I made was to protect this community." He paused, breathed, then looked directly into the camera. "I am the victim of a smear campaign, funded and orchestrated by a group with political motives. A woman who once served alongside me, driven by personal resentment and hatred, has constructed a false narrative designed to destroy my reputation. The room didn't stir. No one was shocked. They had heard this kind of defense before, many times, from many mouths of men who once thought themselves untouchable. But what Renner didn't know was that behind the stage he had built, a final blow had been prepared, calculated down to the smallest detail. The moment he finished the sentence, "I am ready to face any fair investigation," Darnell walked into the room, carrying an official warrant from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, signed and sealed overnight. He said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped to the microphone, laid the warrant on the table in front of Renner, and spoke 4 words. "You are under arrest." Renner froze. For 7 seconds, he didn't move. His eyes swept the crowd, searching for an escape, a lifeline, a familiar face. There was none. Darnell repeated, "I have evidence that you accepted illegal payments, forged search warrants, manipulated records, and concealed identities during an unauthorized military operation. All of it has been verified." Renner still said nothing, but his hand trembled. He raised it, almost as if to surrender, but without control. The legal team stepped forward and cuffed him in front of the national press cameras. That video aired during the evening news that same day. No music, no effects, just clear, slow footage. A man who once stood for power, now bound in the light, before a crowd that had once bowed their heads in front of him. Amara watched the broadcast in silence. She wasn't home. She was sitting at a rest stop nearly 50 miles outside Southcrest, where cell signals were weak and TV channels had to be tuned manually. Chaos lay at her feet. Mercy's head rested on the backpack. Both had replaced their collars with simpler ones. No comms, no insignias, just plain leather straps, like them no longer needing a name. Gina sent Amara a short message. "He's down. The system cracked. The people are with you." Amara didn't reply immediately. She looked out the window, where children ran through an open field. No police cars, no cameras, no suspicious eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't cry, because this victory wasn't something she had ever dreamed of. It was an outcome, the inevitable result of truth being pushed too long into the dark. 1 day later, the city held a public hearing on police reform. Darnell was invited to moderate. Old lawsuits were reopened. Dismissed complaints were pulled again from the archives. And the name Amara Briggs appeared, not as a defendant, not as a witness, but as the one who started it all. No one at the hearing saw her, but her photo was pinned to the board, alongside images of the 2 dogs. Below it was a single line, not the one who stood against the system, but the one who made it face itself. Southcrest was no longer the same. Renner wasn't the only one arrested. 3 other officers were brought to trial for related charges. One confessed, one fled. The last tried to deny it, but faced with undeniable evidence, could only remain silent. And with every set of cuffs locked in place, another piece of the old power structure crumbled. Amara didn't return to Southcrest, but she left something no one could remove. Presence, not a voice, but the consequence. The room was dim, lit only by a soft yellow lamp casting light onto the wooden table. Amara sat there, silent like part of the furniture, her shoulders squared, back straight, eyes fixed on a cup of tea long gone cold. No one rushed her to speak, no one pushed her to remember, but she knew this conversation was no longer avoidable. Darnell sat across from her, no paper, no pen, no recorder, just one person looking at another, waiting for a truth not to process, but to understand. Chaos lay quietly in the corner of the room, not asleep, but not tense either. Mercy sat close at Amara's feet, head resting on her left boot, as if anchoring some invisible thread between now and then. "When was the last time you talked about Mosul?" Darnell asked. Amara didn't respond right away. A long pause passed. Wind rustled through the shutters, carrying the sound of dry leaves outside. The scent of wet earth from last night's rain still hung faintly in the air. She inhaled softly, then spoke. "The last time I talked about it was never," she said. "I didn't think I needed to, because no one would believe me, because all I had left were fragments. No one else made it out except me and the 2 of them." She glanced briefly at Mercy and Chaos. "And none of the 3 of us can talk." Darnell didn't interrupt. He only nodded, inviting her to continue. "When I was called into that operation, I didn't ask why. Amara continued. We just took the order, boarded the plane, and landed at night. No local map, no interior layout of the building, just a voice in the headset, Echo 2. Command link. His voice back then, deep, emotionless, clear with every word. I remember every frequency, every pause between orders. Renner, Darnell said quietly. Amara nodded. We were left behind on the 3rd floor. No exit route. Surrounded on both sides. I called for support. No response. I called again, just static. The 3rd time, I heard his voice. Can't reach you. Handle it. Then the signal cut off completely. Darnell closed his eyes. Fingers clasped, not from anger, but to hold back the cold in his chest. I pulled 3 people into an old restroom. We broke the wall, crawled through a pipe, but 2 were shot as soon as they came out. The 3rd got his arm torn by shrapnel. I had to hold the bleeding until he passed out. Then it was just me and these 2. She tapped gently on Chaos's back. We hid under an abandoned pump station for nearly 10 hours. I used my undershirt to wrap the wound, used the water from my boot to keep our lips from cracking, used a piece of mirror to reflect moonlight and find direction. No one came looking, no rescue team, no helicopters. We walked nearly 4 kilometers to reach a safe zone. When we returned, they gave us one line. The operation failed. No further inquiry. Did you ever think about reporting him back then? Darnell asked, his voice low. I wrote the report, Amara replied, but it never went through. A week later, I was discharged for psychological trauma and loss of operational coordination. I didn't fight it. I understood the game. Darnell looked at her for a long time. And you thought he wouldn't come back? Amara gave a small, joyless smile. I knew he would. Someone like him never misses the chance to silence the one person who could cost him everything. But I also knew if he returned under the badge, I had to live like a soldier in the shadows. I had to be ready. And you were ready, Darnell said softly. Amara didn't confirm, but the presence of hundreds of videos, data files, counter-strike plans, and the team she built in silence is her answer. Darnell suddenly asked, why the 2 dogs? You could have lived with someone, a teammate, family, but you chose 2 creatures that can't speak. Amara looked down at Mercy, her gaze softening like embers at the end of a fire. Because they don't betray, they don't rewrite the story, they don't twist it. When I say protect, they don't ask why. When I go silent, they don't leave. And on the battlefield, they don't turn around. The room was silent. So, what made you decide to fight back? Darnell asked. Amara looked him in the eye. Because this time, I couldn't let him write the story again from the winner's mouth. I couldn't let another child grow up believing justice is only for those in the best uniform. I didn't want to be a hero. I just didn't want to die as a shadow. Darnell stood up, placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not a shadow anymore. Amara didn't answer, but in her eyes, something passed. Not a tear, but the closing of a chapter after 10 years. 3 days after his arrest, Renner appeared on television, not as a defendant, but as a guest on a well-known special interest program aired by a media outlet previously funded by anonymous financial sources. The screen was split. On one side, Renner's face, still slightly swollen but trying to project calm. On the other, the host's professional smile, as if discussing weather forecasts, rather than a string of national scandals. I've spent more than 20 years serving this country, Ranner said, his tone so composed it seemed rehearsed, and I understand that in war, things are not always black and white. Survivors, those who've been through trauma, sometimes form inaccurate memories of the past, the host asked. You mean Briggs? The one accusing you misunderstood what happened in Mosul? Renner didn't nod, but his gaze tilted slightly, and his voice lowered to a near whisper. I'm not here to contradict her. I'm just here to say that I did call for support. If it never arrived, that wasn't my fault. The interview ended with a close-up of Renner placing a hand on his chest, eyes locked on the camera. I'm not perfect, but I'm not a monster, and I believe justice will prevail, even when the media isn't on my side. After the broadcast, a wave of counter-narrative pieces surfaced, written by former officers, retired military analysts, and political bloggers of unclear origin. They didn't deny Renner's wrongdoing. They simply raised a question. Is a woman with a sealed psychological file and 2 combat dogs the model we should be celebrating? One standout article in a right-leaning political magazine bore the headline, From soldier to media symbol, is Amara Briggs the product of a sophisticated PR campaign? The 5,000-word piece offered no concrete evidence, but was filled with phrases like possibly, allegedly, and according to unidentified sources. Gina read that article at 3 a.m., eyes unblinking. She forwarded it to Amara with one line, "We're in round 2. Amara wasn't angry. She never got angry at attacks like that because she was used to them. From her first day in uniform, she had learned that part of the system didn't exist to protect people, but to protect its image. And when that image was threatened, it lashed out like a wounded animal, aiming straight at the weakest spot of whoever exposed it. Identity, history, race, gender. She entered this fight not as a victim, but as someone who understood that words are bullets, and now the bullets were flying. Gina contacted 3 independent journalists who had previously covered whistleblower crackdowns within the military system. Within 24 hours, they worked with Amara to construct a detailed timeline, from the Mosul operation to the sudden disappearances of her former teammates, to Echo 2's role, to Renner's emergence within the L Protocol organization, and finally to his rise through the police system with a record that had been clean. The article was published on a decentralized news platform. It was not flashy, not emotional, not layered, just the truth, laid out in a timeline with original photos, verified documents, audio recordings, maps, and notarized testimonies. Beneath a single headline, "History forgets no one, even if he wears a different uniform." The article drew 1.2 million views in 18 hours. Darnell continued the internal campaign. He called for the reopening of all previously dismissed complaints tied to Renner and Rickson, along with a court order to extract financial records from the security projects they had approved. A string of irregular invoices surfaced. Equipment purchased from unverifiable sources, dog training contracts signed with non-existent companies, tens of thousands of dollars routed through intermediary accounts no one claimed. In one internal meeting, an officer stood up mid-room and said, "Who are we protecting? A man who killed his team, then came home wearing a police badge?" The room went silent, and that was when the system began to crack from within. Not because of outside pressure, but because those who had stayed silent no longer wanted to bow their heads. Amara gave no interviews during that time. She made no public appearances. She sent only one open letter, exactly 1 page long, no decoration, no defense. Just a single paragraph. "I am not perfect, but I know who left us behind, and I've lived long enough to tell the truth." The letter was shared hundreds of thousands of times, reprinted in newspapers, and read aloud at a memorial for the missing veterans from that campaign, the one where no one had ever said the name Mosul. Meanwhile, Renner hired a new legal team. They filed a countersuit, accusing Amara of violating national security laws by disclosing classified material, but the federal court rejected the case after 3 days with a clear ruling. No documents have been proven to remain classified at the time of disclosure, and the release served a legitimate public interest in protecting civil rights. When the news broke, the online community launched a campaign under the hashtag #TruthUnleashed, featuring an image of Amara and the 2 dogs standing before a wall of evidence with the caption, "We don't speak, but we prove." The media battle lasted nearly 2 weeks, and when the last wave of disinformation faded, what remained was not about who was right or wrong. It was about who could stand their ground through the fire. Amara didn't win by saying more. She won by never saying a single false word. That morning, the sky was clear, no wind, sunlight stretching across the road leading into the South Crest City Hall, where the administration held a special public hearing, not for debate, not for accusation or defense, but to re-examine cases involving tactical response in law enforcement. Very polite wording, but everyone knew this was an unofficial trial revisiting the core question: were chaos and mercy offensive weapons or silent witnesses to a violent system? Amara didn't want to attend. She had nothing left to prove, but Gina had said it best. "You may not need to, but what about them?" And she had looked toward the 2 creatures lying by the door, where sunlight through the window glinted off fur now streaked with silver. So Amara showed up, not in uniform, not bearing any symbol except the simple collars worn by Mercy and Chaos. No leashes, no muzzles, no escort. She walked into the hall, among hundreds. Cameras were present, the media was staged. But she said nothing. On the podium, a video clip played. Footage from a security camera inside Amara's home. The first raid, when Chaos and Mercy stood blocking the doorway, not attacking, not moving, not making contact, just waiting for a command. Then, the moment Rickson touched Amara and Chaos let out a single growl before stepping back, never lunging forward. Each second was slowed down, magnified, overlaid with behavioral data analyzed by an independent evaluation agency, tracking reflexes, animal control under trained conditions, pupil dilation, and tail signaling. The conclusion from a senior canine training expert stated, these two dogs did not act as weapons. They acted as precision, coordinated tactical operatives. No autonomy, no excessive behavior, no spontaneous threat. In the hall, no one breathed loudly, because in that moment, for the first time, the dogs, the very ones the public had been led to believe were trained killing weapons, were now called by another name, dog soldiers. No one in that room could deny what they were witnessing. Not animals out of control, but comrades who waited for orders. Knew enemy from ally, stayed silent under pressure, and held back even when they could have attacked. After the video, no one spoke for 12 seconds. Then, one council member, a veteran who had served in Fallujah, said in a raspy voice, "I've seen American soldiers lose control when touched. These two held discipline better than my whole platoon." The hall erupted in laughter, not loud, but enough to loosen the tension stretched tight as wire. Amara stood still. Chaos and Mercy lay at her feet, unmoving, eyes wide open. Gina then read the official report from the Tactical Behavior Oversight Organization. "We confirm that the actions attributed to these two canine units do not constitute aggressive behavior, show no signs of stimulus beyond controlled thresholds, and fully comply with the handler's commands. Therefore, classifying them as dangerous animals has no legal or scientific basis." She set the report down, then pointed to Chaos and Mercy. Base beings do not need to speak. But what they've done has spoken for the rest of us. A woman in the hall, the mother of the boy who used to live next to Amara, stood up. "I used to think they were dangerous. I wouldn't let my son near them. But one time, I collapsed at my front door, and Chaos was the first to notice. He pulled me off the steps, then tapped his paw on my door. The doctor said I had a severe drop in blood pressure. If I hadn't been taken to the hospital 10 minutes earlier, I might not have made it. Truth doesn't need speeches. Truth needs words, like that." Then a journalist asked, "So what do we call Chaos and Mercy now? War dogs? Weapons? Or witnesses?" No one needed to answer. The entire hall rose to their feet as Amara stepped down. She didn't bow, she didn't raise her hand, she simply held the collars of Chaos and Mercy, leading them out of the room like someone guiding two living souls back from a battlefield that had no map. That same afternoon, a draft bill was submitted to the state government, the Mercy Protection Act, banning the labeling of animals as weapons in civilian missions without independent scientific assessment. The law was named to honor a dog, but its purpose was to honor truth that cannot lie, cannot be bought, cannot be trained to deceive, but only to carry out what it's been entrusted with. On social media, images of Chaos and Mercy appeared on shirts, flags, banners, with the words, "We didn't need to bark. We saw it all." The next day, Amara left Southcrest without saying goodbye. But every road she walked marked the steps of 3 beings, 1 human, 2 dogs, as if to remind the world that truth does not need to scream. It only needs to enter the room and be silent the right way. The early morning rain settled over the city of Southcrest like a shroud on the day the state government officially announced a law unlike any in the civil history of the state, the Mercy Protection Act, named after the dog once listed as a potentially lethal animal weapon in an internal report no one dared to sign. There was no grand ceremony, no red ribbon stretched across the civic courtyard, but hundreds of people still stood beneath the eaves of government buildings, holding umbrellas and handwritten signs. There were no political slogans, no party names, just one bold white line on a black background. We do not forget those who stayed silent so we could speak. Inside the state legislature chamber, Representative Marquez, a Latino American once wrongfully assaulted by police in 1999, was the first to speak as the bill entered its announcement phase. Today, we do not pass a law to praise a person or a dog. Today, we acknowledge this: the system can fail, and when it does, something must keep it from going over the edge. The bill passed by a landslide. Its core provisions included a strict ban on any use of military-trained dogs in civilian settings without a three-tiered oversight mechanism, a prohibition on deploying animals in operations that could infringe on civil liberties, and, specifically, any case labeling an animal as a biological weapon must be supported by behavioral evidence and medical reports. The only person not present at the announcement, the very one the law was named to honor, was Amara. No one knew where she was. After the hearing that recognized Chaos and Mercy not as weapons but as witnesses, Amara vanished from Southcrest like a storm that left no trace. No press interviews, no photos after the final video release, no response from the account once used to send her a pin letter to the public. Gina received a tightly sealed package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note in black ink. "You finish it, I have to go." The USB contained all remaining data, a full copy of the archive along with a map marking areas flagged by police as potentially dangerous zones. Gina spent 3 nights reviewing every line, tagging each location. Then she launched a new web interface with a simple domain name, Unflag Hus, where anyone could enter their address and see if their home had ever been subjected to unlawful surveillance. The website was later integrated into the independent data monitoring systems of 3 international human rights organizations, but the name listed as its founder was Mercy B. The only person who knew the real name behind it was Gina. On the other side of the city, Darnell stepped into the internal personnel meeting room for the first time as the head of the department's ethics oversight unit. He didn't wear anything elaborate, just a faded blue shirt and a badge printed with the words Internal Affairs, Level A. In his opening speech, he didn't recount achievements. He asked a single question. When was the last time you asked yourself, are we doing the right thing? No one answered. And that was when Darnell understood. The legacy Amara left behind was not data, not video, not speeches. It was the silence that forced people to face themselves. A few months later, in a small town nearly 200 miles from Southcrest, people noticed a strong-built, middle-aged black woman walking every morning with 2 large dogs, one jet black, one silvery white. No one knew her name. She didn't use a phone, spoke little, occasionally visited the library to borrow books on philosophy, military history, and Eastern theology. When a local boy once asked, "Are you Briggs?" she only smiled, patted his head, and kept walking, as if no such name had ever existed. But at a national summit on civilian security reform in the Capitol, where delegates debated new policy frameworks, one representative placed a plain sheet of paper on the table. It showed a woman walking 2 dogs at sunset, their shadows stretched across red sand, with a handwritten caption below, "I didn't change the world, I just refused to let it crush me in silence." That was how Amara left history, not with gunfire, not from a pedestal, but through an absence that made the rest ask themselves, if one person could do that, what will the rest of us say when history calls our name? Doors once thought permanently closed in Southcrest began to open, little by little, not because of top-down orders, but from the quiet, persistent knocking of those who had once been considered voiceless. A woman who had been pulled from her car in the middle of the night for suspicious driving now walked into City Hall with a complaint form in hand. An elderly, brown-skinned man who had been ordered face down on his front lawn during a wrong address check now sat in the public hearing room, his grandson beside him. No one came alone anymore. The people of Southcrest no longer waited for the media to report their stories. They held their cameras, went live themselves, told their own stories, one by one, in the simplest words. I was silent, now I speak. From those small accounts, a wave spread outward. Neighboring towns began to host citizen hearings, where anyone could stand for 3 minutes and speak about a time they were treated as invisible, not to seek pity, but to prove they existed. A 13-year-old child who had seen his father handcuffed while watering the lawn stood in a town hall and read a handwritten poem. I don't know who was right or wrong, but if silence means right, then maybe wrong has more to say. No one told him to stop. No one cut the microphone. Marches began happening without announcement. No political slogans. No demands for reparations. Just people, dressed in black, wearing pins bearing the silhouettes of Amara, Chaos, and Mercy, walking in rows through streets once marked for special surveillance. On the sidewalks, white paint spelled small words, "We saw," and "We remember." A law student reprinted the full record of Amara's case into a research binder and used it for her thesis. Turning a person into the excuse for a system to exist is the most sophisticated form of violence. Her advisor had once defended police officers, but he gave her an A+. In a high school, the principal set up a large whiteboard in the hallway. With the prompt, "Ever been treated unfairly? Write it down. No name needed." In 3 days, the whiteboard became a wall covered in handwriting, drawings, and one uneven line in block letters. She didn't scream, but she made the whole city listen. Small towns across the state began requesting the release of internal patrol data. Data science students formed public audit teams, which they called Echo Watch, a way to honor the unit Amara had once been left behind in. Every time they found signs of misconduct, they marked the map with a red dot. The map grew crowded, but no one wanted it cleaned overnight. They just wanted it real. Even the police officers began to speak. A young recruit wrote on his blog, "I used to believe justice was something carried in a badge. Now I know it's in how I respond when someone falls and no one reaches out." Another asked during a meeting, "If every report can be edited, how long until we can rewrite trust?" Those who had never cared about politics, about violence, about race, were no longer on the sideline. Because the name Amara was no longer just a person. It was a bold question printed across the map of national security. When someone must defend themselves from the very system meant to protect them, what do we call that? Some called it resistance, others called it awakening. There was no official name for this movement. It was just people talking to each other after years of silence. In markets, in schools, in churches. They didn't talk about politics. They said, "She didn't wait to be saved. She saved herself. And then she saved the rest by not forgetting who she was." On a cold night in a small suburb, people screened a documentary about Amara's case outdoors. Using a white sheet stretched across an old brick wall, children sat on the ground, adults stood behind with folded arms. When the scene came where Chaos stood between Amara and Renner's gun, the crowd held its breath, and when Mercy slowly stepped back on command, holding her ground, the entire courtyard broke into applause without being asked, not for a heroic act. But something in the silence of the two dogs reminded them of the instinct to know right from wrong. A child asked his mother, "Will she come back?" The mother didn't answer. She just bent down, gently pulled his hand, and said, "She doesn't need to. She left us here to finish." And that was true. Amara never appeared again after that. But in hundreds of flyers, thousands of pins, countless banners, hashtags, reports, theses, songs, and poems, her image, and those of the two beside her, passed beyond the role of characters. She had become the echo of a society that had stayed silent for too long. The following spring, when the snow had fully melted from the roads leading into the northern state forest, a small new cabin appeared, resting quietly by the lake. No address, no nameplate, no Wi-Fi. Yet nearly every week someone stopped by to leave a wildflower on the porch. No one knew exactly who lived in that cabin. Some said it was a veteran, others said a retired dog trainer, but no one tried to take a photo or ask questions. Some things do not need to be confirmed, because in people's hearts, the answer is already known. In the city of Southcrest, a community center named Echo opened on the site where the old police station once stood. There was no monument, no mural, just a wall of red brick where anyone could write their name in white ink those who were once forgotten. A child wrote, "My dad." A woman wrote, "Me, 2007. A former officer wrote, "Our whole unit," but not anymore. Chaos and Mercy no longer lived with Amara. After everything settled, Gina brought the 2 dogs to live with a blind veteran named Elijah, who had lost his entire unit in the Iraq War. He lived alone on the outskirts, in a simple cabin with a vegetable garden and an old piano. When Chaos entered, Elijah needed only a nose pressed to his hand to understand he was no longer alone. Mercy lay beside him every night. When he played the piano, she didn't howl or bark, only tilted her head slightly, eyes closed. Chaos went with him on every outing. No leash needed, only voice. Neither wore name tags anymore. There was no need. In that area, people called them by simpler names: Shadow and Wind. One black as a moonless night, the other white as morning mist. One day, Elijah received a letter from an elementary school student who had met him at a community talk. The note contained a single line: "I'm not afraid of police anymore. I think I could be like Shadow and Wind. Stand in the middle, not let anyone do wrong." There was no return address, but Elijah kept that letter in a wooden frame by the window. After completing the development of the unflagged bus platform, Gina shifted to providing legal consultation for communities wrongfully flagged for surveillance. She no longer spoke much about Amara, but in every workshop, every call, every line of code she wrote, there was one guiding principle: no one should have to live like a ghost in someone else's data. She never used the word legacy, never said justice. She just did the small work, restoring those once seen as threats back into the citizens. Sometimes, at night, as she sat reviewing what had been uploaded, she remembered the last time she saw Amara. Just a nod, no promises to meet again, no hug, no tears. Meanwhile, the media occasionally still wrote about the Briggs case as a turning point in the national security system. But gradually, people stopped calling it a case or a symbol of resistance. They called it a marker. No one knew Amara's birthday. No one knew where she lived now. But on the 27th of April each year, students in 3 states were given a half-day off to take part in Civic Communication Day, where children asked adults about laws, about rights, and how to speak what is right without shouting. In a classroom in the suburbs, a girl asked her teacher, "Why do we have this day?" He answered, "Because once there was someone who didn't wait for her turn to speak. She stood up. And the strange thing is, people listened." The girl tilted her head. "So who was she?" The teacher didn't answer right away. He just walked to the board and wrote a short line in white chalk: "A legacy doesn't need a name, only a reason for being born." In another part of the state, at a small bus station, the gatekeeper raised a wooden sign carved with the image of a woman walking between 2 dogs. Below it read, "If you feel like you must stay silent just to live in peace, remember, someone once walked the other way." There were no loud flags, no major celebrations, but on every small wall, every gravel path, every park bench, her name, or the trace of her, was still there. It didn't need to be spoken, because the people who remained chose to live as if she were still here. A quiet morning in a small town, the elementary class began as usual with a math quiz, the rustle of books, and the soft voice of a young teacher. The window was open, letting in sunlight through a thin veil of mist, casting light across the whiteboard and old wooden desks. No one in the classroom noticed the woman standing across the street, opposite the school gate, wearing a simple gray coat, a wide-brimmed hat hiding her face, holding nothing but a wildflower plucked from the road. That woman was Amara. She stood there silently, taking no photos, greeting no one. She didn't need anyone to know who she was, but in her gaze was a world shifting in the direction she once hoped for. No patrol cars parked outside the school, no guards, no facial recognition scanners, just children laughing. Backpacks full of books and teachers, no guns, no handcuffs, only steady eyes. Amara didn't enter the school. She stood for a moment watching a group of multiracial students playing tag. A brown-haired child catching a black classmate mid-fall, both laughing. An Asian boy picked up a ball near the gate and waved at her. Amara smiled gently and gave a small nod, saying nothing. She turned away. No one followed, no one called her name, and that, more than anything, was the final confirmation that she had done enough. In the distance, a bus rolled by, with an old weathered poster along its side that read, "You don't need to shout to make change. You just need to stay when someone needs you to stand." The image below was of a woman walking two dogs, one black, one white, into the evening light. No face, no expression, just a straight-backed figure and two long shadows stretched across the road. No one knew who had put that poster up. No one needed to. In one corner of the public library, where the first talk on the Mercy Act was held, there was a single wooden chair, its back engraved with the words, "This is not a seat of honor. This is a seat to remind you that truth doesn't need support. It only needs someone who won't leave it behind." Not long after, a young girl posted a photo online, an image of the woman standing outside the school gate, taken from a distance, her face unclear, just her posture and the wildflower in her hand. The post had no hashtag, no name, only a caption, "I don't know who you are, but I think I understand why you came." The photo was shared quietly. It didn't go viral, it didn't trend, but everyone who saw it knew in their heart the story had come to a close. Not with applause, not with a court ruling, but with the weightless presence of someone who had survived, had fought, had refused to stay silent, and then stepped back. Once she knew the others had learned to speak, no one needed to ask where Amara was now, because the truest answer wasn't in where she stood, it was where she had refused to leave when the world turned away. He was the woman behind it all, and she left in front of her a road that no one needed to unlock. Thank you for staying with us to the end of this journey. If the story of Amara, Chaos, and Mercy moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories about justice, courage, and the power of truth in silence. Every subscription is a step that helps even the smallest voices be heard. See you in the next videos, where together we continue telling the stories that were never told.